So I think we're all now on speaker. I don't know if Mac and Duncan, you can mute if you want until we're ready to start with you, or you can keep yours on, whichever you're comfortable with.
As far as the microphone?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I guess I'll mute it in case the dog goes crazy.
Okay. Ah. I think you've got some fans there, Brian.
Well, they're fans of you too.
Well, I'm fans of, it's a mutual. And Lyle is joining us from California. Gloria's in Florida. I think we are welcoming folks from all over.
The great state of California, from the original Yellow Brick Road. Hello, everybody. We're ready to listen and love.
It's great.
Hi, this is Kathy. I'm in Alaska.
Oh, wow.
It's dark and cold.
What's this? Here we go.
There's Gloria.
There we go.
How are you?
Right there. Hi, everyone.
And Madeline, you'll tell us when we're ready to roll?
Yeah, you are all set whenever you'd like, Sally.
Okay. Well, I am really delighted to see all of you and so grateful that we can share this time this evening with actual living, breathing descendants of Matilda Jocelyn Gage and L. Frank Baum. You notice the order in which I put the names, even though it is L. Frank Baum's birthday. And Brian King, who is going to entertain us with music throughout the program. The thing that just intrigues me about Brian, and I've never heard him sing his songs before, so I am breathless in anticipation, as I know you all are, because if Whoopi Goldberg said that this is the voice she wants to hear before she goes to sleep at night to make sure that she'll have beautiful dreams, maybe we close our eyes, turn off our sound if everybody wants to mute themselves, and listen to the voice that will give us beautiful dreams tonight. Brian, do you want to tell us a little bit about your interest in Baum? How did you come to be singing Oz songs?
I think, oh, I hear myself echoing somewhere. I came into loving The Wizard of Oz as far back as I can remember. I don't remember a time when I didn't know The Wizard of Oz. And I actually have a drawing I did in kindergarten. You can see my obsession. There's even the witch in the background. And I have to say, as a little kid, I loved Dorothy. I identified with her and her adventure. But I also loved the Wicked Witch maybe equally. I know a lot of young kids were freaked out and scared by her and have memories of being traumatized. And I never was. I thought she was misunderstood from the beginning. So I've always loved The Wizard of Oz, and I'm just so grateful to be here tonight, to be part of this program, because it's just been part of my my formative years. And I also came to know Matilda Gage through my friend Chloe Erdman, who's here tonight, who told me about her. And when I learned that connection, it just kind of all clicked for me to know that she was such a, a defender of human rights. And when you look at The Wizard of Oz and you have these very different people working together to defeat oppression and care for each other in an adventure, you're like, oh, now I get it. I get where this came from. So I'm excited to hear folks talk about that connection tonight. But of course, I'm a singer, and probably the first songs I was singing were some of these songs. So I'm going to try to do my own version of a few of them, and I hope you enjoy. I could while away the hours, conferring with the flowers, consulting with the rain. In my head I'd be scratching while my thoughts were busy. I only had a brain. I'd unravel every riddle for every individual in trouble or in pain. With the thoughts I'll be thinking, I could be another Lincoln if I only had a brain. Oh, I could tell you why the ocean's near the shore. I could think of things I never thought before. Then I sit and think some more. I would not be just a nothing, my head all full of stuff and my heart all full of pain. I could dance and be merry, life could be a ding-a-dairy if I only had a brain. If I only had a brain.
Wow.
Thank you, guys.
I don't think any of us have ever heard an interpretation like that before. That takes that song to a whole new level. Oh, Brian, thank you. What a joy. Well, now on to our special family guests. And so excited tonight to have a chance to chat, we all will, with both Mac Hudson and Mac Donaldson. And I'm not going to say much about them. Duncan's about to unmute and join, and here we go. The one thing I'm going to tell you, and then they will fill in everything that you always wanted to know about descendants of Matilda Jocelyn Gage and L. Frank Baum, but they are descendants of, actually, Duncan, I'm going to let you do that if you would, with the pictures that you have.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sally. First off, I'd like to thank Brian for this beautiful song. Thanks for being here tonight. And most importantly, thank you, Sally, for inviting me and for carrying this torch for so many decades. You are an inspiration.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you for bringing Matilda Jocelyn Gage back into history to a degree, and the work that you've done is really substantial for me personally and for our family and for the whole world. This is an important point in time, and Matilda Jocelyn Gage's example is so critical and present at this moment. So thank you for inviting me. Well, first off, I'll just say that I defer to my uncle, Mac Donaldson, who's on the screen with me, as my elder and uncle and a closer association to our family history. And I'll show some of the pictures that you mentioned. Sally, this is a picture of Maud, Matilda Jocelyn Gage's daughter, who married L. Frank Baum, in the parlor there at the house in Fayetteville. And these are a couple of pictures that were from my grandmother, my granny, which I'll mention in just a moment. Here's Kenneth. And this is what Kenneth would be my great grandfather, and the son of L. Frank Baum. And this picture is titled on the thing I have on the outside, Littlest and Best. And then Kenneth's second daughter was my grandmother, I call Granny, Janet Baum Donaldson. And she's really my main connection to the foundation, to my history with L. Frank Baum and the Oz books and other creative endeavors, and also to Matilda Jocelyn Gage and the incredible legacy that she has. I would like to, honor Janet Baum Donaldson foremost as that connection, and then also my mother, Bonnie Donaldson Hudson. She was the first child of that generation and was sort of the matriarch. Unfortunately, she's deceased, so she can't be here to share in her stories, but I'm so glad that her brother Mac is. And just one other person I'll mention is my brother Mac, Mac Hudson, who's been really involved with the Gage Foundation. His master's thesis was about that, and he did an apology and with Gita, and he's been really involved, so he helped me to be involved as well. And also I should mention as well, sorry, Gita, who has been an incredible person in the family, who is was Ozma daughter, and Ozma was my granny Janet's sister, and she was the first daughter born in the family, so she was named Ozma as being the first daughter born of the lineage from L. Frank Baum.
Mm. Oh, thanks, Duncan, for that introduction. And Mac, Janet was your mother.
Yes, that's correct. And one of the interesting things about, just aside, is the Ozma being the first daughter, granddaughter of L. Frank Baum. Her daughter was Dorothy. They call her name is Gita now, but it was actually Dorothy. So I always knew her as Dorothy. And we kind of grew up together. We would go to California. My mother, when L. Frank Baum went to California to try to get the Oz stories in a cinema form, that's why they ended up from Chicago to Los Angeles. And one of the remembrances that my mother had of Oscott, which was the house that they had there in Los Angeles, was that Maud had an electric car. And that electric car, she would drive it around, and my mother was probably 7 or 8 years old. And she remembers it always had fresh flowers, and that they would drive and, would do whatever errands they would do. And of course, her grandfather, L. Frank, was always puttering in the garden. And she remembers that when he had a contract of some sort to produce a book every year for the publishers, after the Wizard had been such a success, and then ensuing stories that he'd written, TikTok, the Scarecrow and Oz, and Galinda, and all those sorts of stories, he was having to write a story a year. He would go and sort of seclude himself to try to develop a story that he that could be published and that he would be appreciative of having his name on it. So those are some of the things that Janet, my mother, remembered about, that portion, Oscott. And her dad, Kenneth, was, they lived in Altadena, and then the Depression hit pretty hard, and they had a cottage on Balboa Island. And they decided to sell the house in Altadena and move to a smaller, more humble situation, which was in Balboa Island, which of course today is sold by the square inch. But she remembers and grew up there as a beach girl, as a California beach girl. And, she attended St. Mary's Catholic School. And then after she had graduated from high school, she went to the University of Arizona, where she met my father. And then they were married after Pearl Harbor, which, of course, that stimulated everything. It kind of goes back in a way. The little that I know about L. Frank Baum is that when he was a young man, a young boy, actually, he was in military school. And this was right almost during the Civil War, after the Civil War. And that has such a profound effect, that war, on America and what was happening in America. I really feel like that was part of his desire to do something with his life that had meaning. And when the travesty of war and how it left people and how he went on, obviously to be an actor and to have that sort of creative outlet was there. But I also think if you look at the hardships that he had somewhat in his life and how he had his life, he was constantly trying to create and make something better. It's so obvious in all the steps that he had, and that most recent PBS thing kind of in a way intimated that it was sort of carrying on. We all, our generation, Brian's generation, Duncan's generation, think of The Wizard of Oz a lot with that MGM story. But in reality, if you read the book, there's so much more depth to that. There's a lot of beauty in that MGM thing, movie, and the way it was presented, and how it brought Technicolor in, which was an innovation at the time, going from black and white in Kansas to Technicolor in Oz. And that change, was obviously very creative. And my mother remembered as a girl going to the Grumman Theater when the opening of Wizard of Oz was, and they had the family there. They had Robert, and they had Kenneth, and the members of the family were obviously part of the, I guess you'd say, celebrities for the opening of the movie. But I just feel like that for people that are watching, if they're all concerned about Oz, I think that L. Frank had a tremendous amount of creativity and drive to produce art, to produce that the beauty of theater and the interconnection with whether it be humor or tragedy or whatever. And I think that his mother-in-law, Matilda, had a tremendous influence on him, because from what I gathered, and maybe this, Sally, that there was a lot of conversation. We didn't have television. They didn't have television. They barely had radio, and they really didn't. So much was spent around the parlor or on the porch in the evening discussing. And Matilda, with her commitment and her in-depth knowledge of sort of people and the struggling and what maybe the suffragette movement, certainly, but more than that, it's life and those aspects that he discussed with Matilda come out in his books. Ginger, obviously, and other aspects were so much a part of his stimulus with Matilda. And I think that that's something that is a connection that most people maybe wouldn't see. But I know my mother talked about that a lot, about how that she felt like that Matilda had a strong personality. And that personality was directly influential in L. Frank and what he was doing with his creativity. So I've
Oh.
already talked enough.
Oh, that's fascinating, Matt. I mean, already I've learned things I haven't known since I since I started meeting the family. Thank you for these stories, Duncan and Mac. You know, Matilda did stay with Frank and Maud after Henry died, her husband, in 1884. The next 14 years of her life, she would close up her home in Fayetteville and go to wherever the Baums were staying. She'd help Maud with the four boys, and they were reading the same books. They're having conversations. One of the things I'm curious about is that sometimes the impact of something follows, in a family line. And Matilda, toward the end of her life, stopped eating meat. And Frank, of course, Maud's story about she was always hard pressed to find a new breakfast meat for Frank. He loved, apparently loved meat. So in the Oz books, I think there's a little bit of that with the hungry tiger who goes perpetually hungry because he longs to eat fat babies, but he knows that it would be morally wrong. And I really wonder if there were, conversations about what is it appropriate to eat. But I'm wondering if does the love of meat or the corresponding vegetarianism run in the family? And Mac, I see something behind you that may be a clue to that.
Well, yes, we had discussed it a little earlier. Those are a set of horns off of a steer that my father had in the 50s here in southern Arizona. And the horns are a beautiful ebony color. And he just felt like this is such an unusual set of horns that he'd like to keep them. So when the steer was slaughtered for meat, he kept the horns and then had them mounted. And, I think that if you just take a situation like you just mentioned, where you have two opposing positions, eating meat or not eating meat, and you can think about the stimulus that they would have had actually probably in a jovial manner of kidding each other or whatever, you can see that would be something that they, Matilda and L. Frank, would have and be a joy of family. I think that we all have in all our families have little aside things that are maybe quirks of an individual that come out, like Duncan and I can talk about his brother Mac, or talk about my brother John and the little quirks that are there, or like you had mentioned when you had talked to my brother John about some of his childhood memories of me. So those things carry over, but and I think that as we have stimuli to create and to write, as L. Frank did, and also Matilda, if you look at her works, there's a lot of forethought in what she was doing, and also not only creative from a point of view of an explanation of a thesis or a point of view, but also how it was not repetitive. It wasn't like she was just standing on a soapbox beating you over the head with the fact that you shouldn't eat meat. It wasn't that way at all. I feel like there was a whole lot of intercourse between the thoughts.
I have a question for both of you. I never read the Oz books until I started, falling in love with Matilda Jocelyn Gage, and then read the Oz books and saw her, as you were saying, Mac, throughout the books. I really saw that information, the influence, the conversations. But I'm curious, did you both grow up reading the Oz books when you were little? Were they read to you?
Yeah, my mother read the books to us, and we always had copies, and then we would read them to ourselves. And I think that even Ruth Plumley Thompson, is that right? Was like, in my memory good? Who took on and wrote. We had those books too, and read them, so that carried over. But yeah, it was part of our childhood, both my brother and myself, and my sister Bonnie too, of course. And I think Bonnie was always older. She was 6 years older. She was born during the war. I was born after the war, and my brother was born a year later than me. But Bonnie was always a step ahead because of her age. So there were a lot of books that I'm sure she read because they were dog-eared and stuff like that, I just remember my mother reading to us at night, when we were in bed. But I know that Bonnie, I'm sure, did she ever say anything to you, Duncan, about the Oz books?
Yeah, so the Oz books definitely were part of our growing up. My brother and I, Mac, and not my uncle Mac, part of our growing up. And I know, like was referred to earlier, it wasn't about the movie, it was about the books and the series. And so it wasn't even really about, the Wizard of Oz, of course, was the start and the first one, but it was really about the series, all these amazing characters, and the ones that, some of the most memorable ones, like the Jack Pumpkinhead or the Patchwork Girl. These are just phenomenal characters I really remember. And it was really important to be a part of the Oz series, not necessarily this one, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz book. So that definitely was part of my growing up. I was definitely read to from my mother, the Oz books, and my father, Murray Hudson, the Oz books, and I read some of those as well whenever I was older.
And in case, I'm sorry. Go
I
ahead.
was just going to say one interesting thing to me, that as I was a little boy, we would go back and visit my paternal grandparents. And my grandfather, who was very well read and actually was an author as well, and to him, knowledge and reading were hand in hand. He was obviously a part of. He was born in 92. But anyway, he said to me, which really struck home, because we'd always been talking about his family and what his grandpa did and what his wife's family did and all that. He said, when you think about the power that L. Frank had by how he wrote and what he did, he was so much more influential than our family, which had wealth, but because of what he did as an artist and as a creator and as an author. And it really struck home to me. This is power, this is greatness. It's not just wealth, it's that creative aspect that transferred and just gave millions that insight into life, as Brian would said earlier.
That was your DuPont grandfather.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he was actually Donaldson. He was Donaldson. His family had been in the they were Southerners and kind of lost everything in the Civil War, but he had married wealth. But anyway, yeah, that was really important to me. Stimulated me.
And so I just want to tag on, I've read stories to my children as well. And my daughter Ava, her favorite book is Sky Island, which I bought or won at a Gage Foundation auction. And so one of the lesser known books, it's not part of the Oz series, but incredible book as well. And that's her favorite book.
Yeah. Well, in case everybody on the Zoom doesn't know, there were 14 Oz books. And then, as Max said, Ruth Plumley Thompson took them over, and they're still being written today. And then he wrote a number of other books, some of them under pseudonym. So really prolific writer. A question. Did you grow up knowing about Matilda Jocelyn Gage? And if so, what did you know about her?
I guess I'm first because I'm older. Duncan. But one of the things that of course, yes, the thing was that the Gage family, he was a surgeon, and he had actually been a surgeon in the Civil War, if my memory's right. Maybe I've tweaked it, but that they were part of the Underground Railroad, and that when Matilda Joslyn Gage with Susan B. Anthony, and I've forgotten the name of the other woman. There were three women. What was the other woman's name, Sally?
Elizabeth Cady Stanton.
Elizabeth Stanton, yes. In the window of the house, of the Gage house, Susan B. Anthony etched her initials or her autograph or whatever. So that as a little boy, that was kind of interesting. But no, we really knew well what her, and the connection to the Native American maternal concept rather than paternal. That legacy that she picked up on, and sort of in a way I don't know how to say this gracefully, where that the church had really been very much a dominant factor in keeping women in control. And, so as a little boy, I remember that, my mother telling me that, and about how Matilda was so strong, and that she was part of the movement, and that she had split off when they went to Washington because she couldn't bear the fact that they would have anything to do with Christian ethics and the Christian aspect. She said, nope, that's not what we're talking about here. We're not going to do that. And I'm gone. So, that power there. I remember that. What about
And
you,
that
Duncan?
carried through. That's amazing. Duncan, how about you?
Yeah, I did. I think I think L. Frank Baum was more of what I remember hearing about. And but then coming, with that, a descendant that was a generation before L. Frank Baum, who was significant in the suffragist movement, and that their family was, I don't think we use the terms like, social justice at that time, but that they were involved in the Underground Railroad, that Matilda Joslyn Gage's father was a big abolitionist, and that sort of equality and striving for equal rights was really an important thread in our history. But not the details. Didn't really know the details about Matilda Joslyn Gage and the depth which she was actually involved, and the importance she had on the movement while being subsequently written out of history, really. That I had no idea until much later, and I think a lot of that through your work, Sally, that have brought a lot of that to light.
Sally, I have a question for you. Was it true that Matilda wanted to be like her father, a doctor, and that she was denied entrance into medical school because she was female?
Yes.
So my mother sort of had told me that, and that somewhat stimulated her thing. When you get denied something that you're perfectly qualified to do, and you have this passion for it, and you're denied it, I think that really pushed her to a different frame of mind about how, and then carried it over through the suffragette movement. Would you say that's true or not?
That's absolutely true. And that's really an interesting insight. It leads me to another question. Do either of you find in yourselves anything that you think is part of the legacy of Matilda Joslyn Gage or L. Frank Baum? I know, Mac, your brother John told me a few stories about your acting when you were playing whatever you were playing when you were little, and he would shoot you, and he said you took a full half hour to die, and you did it very dramatically. So he thought that there was something of the and of course, Frank was a ham, at the 1893 World Fair in Chicago. when he's going to meet Maud at the fair. Do you remember this story? And she comes to the fair and she sees I think it was the queen, the Hawaiian traditional queen that was with her entourage, and following up full right there in the entourage is L. Frank Baum and waves at her as he walks by. So that John said you had that same quality about you. So I'm curious if either of you find in yourselves, an identity with either of those ancestors.
Well, I think from my point of view, it was pretty far removed. I met Kenneth, but I was like 2 years old, so I have no memory other than photographs. And you can, I think that, maybe somewhat being dramatic or being creative, follows through like my mother liked to write. Kenneth wrote, L. Frank wrote, and Matilda wrote. So, I think that somewhat carries through. And I like to write, and I've written a few pieces and been published, but I don't, it's so far removed. A great grandfather. I mean, it's
Yeah.
when you read his Our Landlady, that he did in South Dakota, when he wrote for the paper there, and you read those stories, you can think about things similar to, it's a Western scene and what happened in the West, and us, Duncan and I, living in the West and seeing that, and maybe a fact about maybe the Presidio of Tucson or different things. At different time you read in an actual history written by someone who was in Tucson in 1880, and you think about that, and you look at those buildings that are still there. They're still adobe buildings from the original Presidio, and you think about that. You look at what L. Frank was writing at that time on the prairie there, and how that affected his thoughts with the Wizard of Oz too. That's always been a correlation that everybody draws to. It's hard to say for me that I have a direct connection with knowing what they were. I can see my grandfather in my daughter, and I can see, I can see my son and my dad. I can really see a connection as to how they think and how they react. But the removal is so far that, not having any physical, tactical touch with either Matilda or L. Frank, I can't answer that. Duncan?
Well, one thing that I agree with you, Mac, it's hard to relate back exactly, but one thing that I noticed is whenever I had small children, I had 2 daughters, Sophia and Ava, and I would tell them stories at night, and I made up lots of stories that were fantastical stories that I created, and I never really thought about much. I just would be in the moment, very much in the moment, and I didn't really have a consistent storyline, and I never these are not things that I thought out beforehand or wrote down or anything, but I remember reading about L. Frank Baum that Matilda just had, supposedly by her, heard him telling stories to his children, and that was, she was like, well, you need to write these down. These are really great, great stories, and encouraged, Matilda encouraged L. Frank Baum to write these children's stories. I identified with that. I'm not a writer. I have not written anything. But that part, I really identified with that sort of imagination from reading about it. And then the idea of the strong view of social justice and the importance of equal rights, that was really strong thread through my family, and it's very important to me and my family now. And so I identify with Matilda Jocelyn Gage, but I don't know that I would say that I could compare myself to her in any way, a small form.
Well, this is so much fun. I think what we'll do now is have another song from Brian. And while we're doing that, I want all of you to be thinking about questions that you have for Duncan and for Mac. And then we'll get to those questions after we get entertained again by Brian. Take it away.
Hello, everybody. This is wonderful to hear all these stories and learn so much. I'm going to do an original song that I wrote called "Song for the Tin Man," and I'm in a band called What Time Is It, Mr. Fox, and we do a lot of original music and sometimes covers. But this is an original one. I wrote it after a breakup, after a pretty significant relationship. You know, some time had passed, and I went to the club to, you know, just try to start dating again. And I was pretty jaded and feeling rejected and down. And I started thinking about the Tin Man, and like, if the Tin Man was at this bar, how would he be treated? And then I started thinking of technology and where we are. You know, everything moves so fast, and I thought, well, there'd be more advanced Tin Men around, and he might not feel so great. But I do think of him, you know, as a symbol of that love is a verb. You know, he doesn't have his heart; he has to go find it, and then we learn through his behavior and how he treats others, and you know, that's where it's truly at. You know, that's what love is, and the heart is. So that's one influence on the song. And I literally went home from the bar with that in my mind, and I sat down and I put on some Joni Mitchell. And then I thought, okay, I have to write a song. So this song is sort of a tribute to the Tin Man and to Joni Mitchell. Went to a club, watched the pretty boys turn up their noses. Got home at 3, put on some Joni for the roses. I'd still like to see you sometime. Then I came down and examined my lust, and all that I found was the wreckage of us. And no one comes around when the Tin Man's heart starts to rust. No one comes around when the Tin Man's heart starts to rust. I love like a fool. I guess that's the rule when you're lonely. But I tried my best to believe that you had eyes for me only. Then it came down to the trouble of trust. We let ourselves drown because we think that we must. No one comes around when the Tin Man's heart starts to rust. No one comes around when the Tin Man's heart starts to rust. Tonight I've seen love's tarnished face amid the legions of Dorian grays, their factory parts and their polished grays can't hide their eagerness now, or their numbered days. See how fast, how hard he goes. When the harsh lights come up, make a line for the door. Well, here he sits at 3:45, with no one to adore or sustain him. Went to a club, watched the pretty boys turn up their noses. Got home at 3, put on some Joni for the roses. I'd still like to see you sometime. Thank you.
Thank you.
If the Tin Man had a heart, it's broken. Oh, thank you. So, yes, we'll take a breath after that. And let's get on to gallery view so we can see everybody. And let's see what questions we have. I think we have a couple in the chat. Let me see if there's anything before this. Hold on.
Sally, I did see one question that I might speak to, which I think
Please.
was, how's the Harry Potter series compare? I mean, I'm not sure the exact question.
Yeah. Yes.
And
Yeah.
I just know from, or maybe, do you know, is there a specific, I'm sorry if I'm jumping in out of order.
Please do.
Yeah,
I
no,
believe the question.
I asked
Go ahead.
that question. Yeah, I think that both series had huge impacts on kids. I know modern day, they credit Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling for getting kids to read again. I'm not old enough to know how it was in the early 1900s when the Oz books came out. But I just wondered what parallels people might see there and how you might think they're different.
Well, I think that there's a definite, really a strong comparison. Again, like you, I don't know how things were in 1900. I do know that the book was a huge sensation, and and the series was huge, and there was a lot of communication between the children reading the series with L. Frank Baum, and that he probably wouldn't have kept writing the series if there wasn't so much clamor from the children that they wanted to hear more stories. And so I think it was a huge, impactful book and series, and it actually kind of changed course to a degree with the children's writings. I mean, it really was an impactful book that changed the way gender and people are viewed, and it's just really influential. And there's no question that the Harry Potter series is hugely influential. And I don't know if there's something comparable between those two times that had that much impact in, at least in children's literature. And certainly with what was interesting about the Harry Potter books is that they were books first, and then they were hugely popular movies, but they really were books, and they were read. And my daughter was hugely into the Harry Potter books, and the movies were coming out. She kind of came into the middle of the series when she was reading, and her first grade teacher thought it was a bad idea that she was on book 3, that this was too serious, and she would read these books no matter what. So I do think there is a definitely, and of course there's themes of witchcraft, and witchcraft not being like some evil bad thing, but actually a source for good. The Harry Potter books take it to a different place, but absolutely, I don't think there would have been Harry Potter books if there wasn't the Wizard of Oz. I don't know if there's been people writing or talking about the comparisons. One other point I would make out is that, and I don't know if there are comparisons with this, but the Studio Ghibli films out of Japan, the animation, those stories, I think, to me, have that imagination that the Wizard of Oz series has. And I think, I don't know, but I would think that those Studio Ghibli films like Spirited Away and Totoro, these incredibly popular movies, the most popular movies in Japan, and my daughters love these movies, I think owe a big debt to the L. Frank Baum Oz series as well.
Great, thank you. I want to just break for a minute we do have another descendant of Matilda Jocelyn Gage and L. Frank Baum. Greg, I just outed you. I don't know if you want to say hi or share anything with us. Really, really pleased to see you.
Sure. Hi, Sally. Great to see my family on the call. Hey, Mac and Duncan. It's been a long time. I think I might remember that steer on the wall there from when we were kids. But no, I love the discussion. Thank you for the invite and the introduction. It's really wonderful that the stories are alive, and we're back now. Once again, fighting for human rights, and doing it kind of with our family's heritage in the forefront, which I just love. But then also, communicating to those more creative, and L. Frank taking those stories. I don't think he ever would have married Maud had he not adopted those into his psyche and been able to express them in the way that he did. So I'm grateful for that and happy to see you all here. So thanks for the introduction.
Oh, thanks, Greg.
Thank you. I say, Greg, your mother has been so influential for me and for us too.
Thanks, man.
And for the Gage Foundation as well. Yeah, and if I remember right, Greg, you are carrying on a tradition that Matilda Jocelyn Gage was not able to do, that you are in political life, am I right?
Yeah. I got involved a few years ago and ran for our local government and won the city council seat in Santa Monica. And so was happy to further our family's work and would love to share the stories. I became a member of the League of Women Voters, and in that membership would share with some of the elders, the stories of Matilda, the book Born Criminal, which is an incredible book about Matilda's life, and some of the stories that were discovered in that book were just fantastic. But what's really fascinating about it is in addition to that sort of political time in the 1900s and now, apparently, and my mom found this out, and she'll share it, I'm sure, with everybody soon. But our family back when we were in Europe in the 1200s were part of the signing of the Magna Carta in 1215. So we can take our lineage back, more than 600 years and talk about freedom fighting for quite some time. So it's quite an honor to be a part of that legacy.
That's great. Thanks, Greg. We have a question about whether either Duncan or Mac were members of the family group that went in person to apologize to the Sioux Nation. If they're willing, be grateful to hear their story. Well, I was part of that and know that neither Mac nor Duncan were, but one of the things that I might mention is that there has been a real interest in people hearing about that. So I can't say that we'll definitely be doing it, but this is another sort of people wanting to hear about that family apology. So I guess stay tuned for that. Otherwise, we'd be doing third person stories. Lyle Gregory has a question from Los Angeles.
Hi, everybody. Sally, thank you so much for doing this. I am from the great state of California. I lived on the back lot of MGM for 30 years on lot number 3. I knew Ray Bolger back in the 80s until the time he left this earth, and Jerry Marin, the last living Munchkin, and Jerry Marin and all of us were together with your family, Bob and Claire, who I've known for 30 years, put them on radio and done so much. We were there at the 75th anniversary when Oz was taken into IMAX, and it was quite extraordinary. And a lot of the Yep Harburg's family was there and everything else. My question and invitation is this. As Sally knows, and Mimi Kennedy, my dear friend, and I had pleasure putting Mimi and Claire and Bob together at that great event Sally came and we did about a year ago at Mimi's home. This is the invitation. I'm still in radio, and a brand new radio station called KBLA, my dear friend Tavis bought it. We're in rehearsals and we go live in about 3 weeks. It is Black owned, Black, white, Latino, Asian, gay, and straight, but all Black owned and all Black talent. I would love to invite Mac, Duncan, and Greg here in the neighborhood to come on air. Mimi's going to come in studio, and we will focus totally on civil rights. I've marched in three marches last year, and I'm sure you guys have too, on social justice, on the Underground Railroad, and we'll bring it up and I'll intersperse it with cuts of Oz music, and it'll be magical. And it goes not only to the largest radio market here in Los Angeles, the great state of California, but it will be heard all over the world because we're apps and we're everything else. This is real radio. It's not a podcast, which are real too, but we are real radio. It's 50,000 watt station. That's my invitation. I put my email and cell there on the table. We can also get in touch through Sally, who will be on the show with us too. Would love to have you guys all here. So follow that yellow brick road to frequency here in California, the great state of California. This is magical. And let us continue the social work that Matilda Jocelyn Gage started. Here, as I like to say to all the young people in our station, your ancestors are talking and we're listening. You're all invited. Please, let's all stay in touch. We will make that happen maybe in June or July, whenever it's convenient for you guys.
Exciting. Wow. And we'll make sure that the Gage community knows about it.
We can live stream it. We can do a live stream.
Oh, that'd be great.
And the studios are magnificent, by the way. They're art galleries right in Lamert Park. We'll stream it and maybe make it a fundraiser for the Jocelyn Gage Foundation and drive a lot of business there.
Loving that. Loving that.
Thank you guys.
Oh, thanks. So stay tuned for that one too. I think we're doing upcoming events here.
From the next segment.
From MG, Gloria, great idea. MG, did Gage's interest in theosophy carry on in the family, or does any family member feel like her spirituality found in her books have? Anybody want to take that on? Matt, Duncan, Greg? Spirituality?
Well, I think the spirituality, certainly, you know, I don't know much about that certain, I know that there was like a mysticism, Eastern European influence in the mid-century, but certainly the spirituality aspect is important for, you know, me and my family, and that tradition of spirituality was kind of put in higher regard than a certain theology of, you know, of a certain religion per se.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say that's true for my family too. I mean, my mom she still is. She's going through her analyst degree now and has been an incredible student of so many different schools of thought around spirituality, and that definitely came through me. And actually, so much of the theosophical stuff from the early 1900s. I mean, I remember, going through my mom's library and looking at books and going, wait, what's that? Wait, what did this person say? And opening up pages and seeing all these, crazy hermetic, beautiful drawings and trying to make sense of them. And, I still, those are the images in my head when thinking about, chakras and spirituality and energy and those sorts of things. And then learning that, that came through a lot of the study and time that Matilda had put into that. It's a wonderful history to be a part of.
Great, thanks. Mac, you have anything to add?
I can only relate a story, two stories connected with spirituality. One is that the very first Lutheran church in upper state New York near Schenectady was founded by the family. They were, Lutherans. They were German Hessians, I believe, and they'd come over in the Revolutionary War, and they started the first Lutheran church up there, which was a strange kind of connection to me, in that I was raised Episcopalian by my mother, Janet, but she was raised Catholic. And so the teachings of Christ and all, of course, Old Testament and New Testament have always been very much a part of my psychic. But I think that when we realized that our children, we went to my father-in-law's funeral, and we hadn't been churching our children because we play in polo on the weekend. And so that was our, that's what we did. We didn't go to church. We had horses and trained horses, and that's what we did to make a living. And so we were at his funeral, Hayes Parton's funeral, and we realized that the children had no knowledge of religion at all. And so we went looking for a church, and there was a big farm boy Lutheran from Iowa with his heart right there. I mean, a wonderful man, just the essence of Christianity, of giving and sharing and warmth. And there it was, going back to a root that I didn't even know I had, going back to that family history of the Baums. So that was one thing. And the other thing, I remember my mother saying that when his wife, Kenneth's wife, which was also Dorothy, died, he really wanted to get in touch with her. And he did a lot of Ouija boards and things of that nature to try to get in touch with Dorothy, because she was the love of his life. And with her being gone, he was less than a man, in his own opinion. According, that's what my mother said. And that was just a desire for him to get back to communication with her. And so those are the only two aspects that I can say, are part of my recollection.
Thank you. What a good note to move toward Brian's final song for us tonight, and then we'll all come back on and say goodnight.
Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me. Where troubles melt like lemon drops, oh, way above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me, oh, somewhere over the rainbow. Bluebirds fly, birds fly over the rainbow. Why then, oh why can't I? If happy little bluebirds fly beyond the rainbow, why, oh why can't I?
Bravo.
Ah,
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brian.
Such a pleasure to be here with everybody. Thank you. I learned so much.
Thank you, Brian. And I think, like with Whoopi Goldberg, we will all have beautiful dreams tonight from that. Let's go back on gallery view for a minute, and we can all say good night to each other. Mac, Duncan, Greg, do you have any last words for us?
There's one thing I want to mention, but go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you all for keeping our family alive and these stories alive. I mean, it just means so much to me, and I know that I share these stories with my kids. My oldest son, his name is Oz, and you know, I get to tell him about our family story, and I get to tell him about the heritage, and you know, that we've been fighting for women's rights and, you know, equal rights for more than a century, and that means a lot to me, my family, personally, and you know, to make this world a better place, we have to keep these memories alive. So thank you all for contributing.
Thank you, Greg.
It's great to see you, Greg. We hadn't seen you in a long time. I just wanted to follow up a little bit on the Harry Potter concept. You know how the woman asked about what was the relationship or the differences or the similarities. When you think about it, when you read, you interact as the reader, and your imagination is what is stimulated. So then therefore you can picture it, or you can see it, or you can feel it. And that's what that's the key of what Oz did. When he took those children, they weren't taking nursery rhymes, you know, or telling something that was maybe had a moral concept that was going to be passed on to the children so that they would live better lives. It was to create their imagination, to allow them to start to imagine. What a beautiful thing. And that's similar to what happened with Harry Potter. You know, that fact that you're tying into that individual reader and their mind and their creativity. Man, what a wonderful thing. That's the last thing I want to say.
Oh, thanks, Mac. And if I can out you for a minute, when you visit the Matilda Jocelyn Gage Center, the home of Matilda Jocelyn Gage, and you walk into the Oz parlor, you will find the Oz Reading Corner, where there are games for children, there are all kinds of books for children and adults, and you'll see a plaque that you have that part of the Gage home thanks to Mac Donaldson and his brother John in honor of their mother, Janet. So
And
thank
that's
you.
forward to our mother.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Sally.
Duncan, any last words?
Yeah, thank you, Sally, for putting this on. Everybody for being involved. Great to see you, Greg and Mac. Yeah, I just want to mention a couple of things. And one, as far as like that question about the Sioux apology, you know, my brother Mac could really speak to that. He was there. He wrote a thesis about that. So maybe that would be something worth exploring at some point in time. And Greg's mother, Gita, was there as well. So they were two descendants that did that. I had a little baby at the time. It wasn't in my mind of making that, but my brother was very impactful in that. He also gave a book, the Women, Church, and State, to the Fayetteville Library as kind of representing that, which I thought it was very symbolic because a book that had been banned in her time. So that's an interesting little tidbit. And as far as talking about family, I just want to mention my daughter, Sophia. She did an interview in the fall, in the late summer, early fall, around the 100th anniversary of women getting right to vote, about Matilda Jocelyn Gage on our local radio station, KXCI. And that interview is there. People want to check it out. The best way to find it is go to kxci.org and search for Gage, and then it will pop up Matilda Jocelyn Gage. But that's just one other thing I wanted to throw out there of the next generation, you know, working towards those same sort of ideals and cherishing that heritage.
And the Haudenosaunee who honorarily adopted Matilda Jocelyn Gage believe that every decision should be made for the seventh generation. And Sophia is the seventh generation from Matilda Jocelyn Gage, and we do our work in honor of Sophia and your other daughter, but
Yeah, Ava.
Ava.
Yeah.
But Sophia has been at the Gage Center for the opening with her family, and she wrote on the whiteboard where we, you know, have people write on the walls, and her statement is still in the women's rights room 10 years later. We did that grand opening in 2010. I guess it's now 11 years later. So, and we'll send out that link to everybody, Duncan, if you'll get it to us, the link to Sophia's. And Lyle, we will follow up with that, with any information that you have.
I would love to, and I'll end you on that radio spot. Duncan, I'd love to have Sophia on that hour that we will do, because everything you just said, and this is about the next generation, and our station's skewing 20 and 30 years old up. This is all about teaching that next generation. We'd be honored to have. I will just consider it done. All of you here in Los Angeles. Greg, you come in studio, Mimi will be in studio. We can have everybody else on the magic of radio. We can phone it in. We call it, in the business, we call them phoners.
And we'll let everybody know about it. And this is how the Gage community works. So, so grateful to all of you for being here this evening, and stay tuned for more. We'll be letting you know what our next events will be. So thank you all.
Love you guys. Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks,
Love
Sally.
you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Sally.
Great
Thank you,
to see you,
everyone.
Stronger
Duncan
together.
Mac.
This is such a privilege. Thank you.